The evening sun cast long shadows across the Flying J truck stop as Deacon pulled his 18-wheeler into an empty spot. He'd been driving for nearly 14 hours straight, and every muscle in his body ached for rest. The dashboard clock read 7:42 p.m., just enough time to grab a hot meal before settling in for some much-needed sleep. Deacon shut down the engine and sat for a moment, rolling his shoulders to work out the kinks. At 45, his body didn't bounce back like it used to during his military days. 10 years as a Marine Force recon specialist had hardened him in ways most people couldn't understand, but those days were behind him now. These days, his battles were against traffic jams and delivery deadlines. Home sweet home, he muttered to himself as he climbed down from the cab. The September air felt good against his face. Not too hot, not too cold. Perfect traveling weather. He grabbed his small duffel with a change of clothes and his toiletries, locked up the truck, and headed toward the brightly lit building. The parking lot was busy for a Wednesday night. Several big rigs were lined up in neat rows, their drivers likely inside grabbing food or already asleep in their bunks. A few family cars were scattered near the convenience store entrance, and closer to the door, Deacon noticed a row of motorcycles, at least 8 of them, gleaming under the parking lot lights. Their owners weren't hard to spot. A group of men in leather vests huddled around a picnic table near the entrance, passing around bottles and laughing loudly. Deacon didn't need to see the patches on their backs to recognize a motorcycle club when he saw one. Years of training had taught him to spot potential trouble from a distance. Deacon kept his pace steady as he approached the entrance. He didn't slow down, didn't speed up, and didn't make eye contact. But he was aware of everything. The way the laughter paused briefly as he passed. The feeling of eyes tracking his movement, the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Inside, the truck stop was a welcome blast of air conditioning and the smell of coffee and fried food. A tired-looking cashier nodded at him from behind the counter. The place was about half full. A mix of truckers hunched over coffee cups, families with restless kids grabbing snacks for the road, and a few locals who probably came here regularly for the cheap food. Deacon made his way to the restaurant section, automatically choosing a booth against the back wall. Another habit from his military days: always sit with your back to a wall, always keep an eye on the entrance. Some habits were too deeply ingrained to break, even after all these years. A middle-aged waitress with kind eyes and Barb on her name tag approached his table. "What can I get you, hun?" she asked, pencil poised over her notepad. "Coffee, black, and whatever's good tonight," Deacon replied with a tired smile. "Meatloaf special's not bad. Comes with mashed potatoes and green beans. Sounds perfect." Barb nodded and disappeared toward the kitchen. Deacon took the moment of solitude to roll his neck and check his phone. 2 missed calls from his sister, probably wondering when he'd make it to Chicago for their mom's birthday. He'd call her back after eating. The coffee arrived quickly, and Deacon wrapped his hands around the mug, savoring the warmth and the bitter aroma. The first sip burned his tongue, but he welcomed it. Nothing kept you awake on the road like truck stop coffee, strong enough to strip paint and bitter as regret. The door to the restaurant swung open, and 4 men from the motorcycle group sauntered in. They were loud, the kind of loud that came from several beers and the confidence of traveling in a pack. The tallest one, sporting a thick beard and arms covered in faded tattoos, scanned the room like he owned it. His eyes passed over Deacon, then snapped back, lingering a moment too long. Deacon kept his expression neutral as he took another sip of coffee. He wasn't looking for trouble. All he wanted was his meal, a hot shower, and 6 hours of sleep before hitting the road again. The last thing he needed was to get tangled up with a group of bikers with something to prove. The men settled at the counter, ordering beers from a nervous-looking young server. Every few minutes, one of them would glance back at Deacon's booth. He could feel the tension building, a familiar pressure in the air that he recognized from countless situations in his past. Something was brewing, and he was somehow at the center of it. Barb returned with his food, setting the plate down with a smile. "Anything else you need, sugar?" "This looks great, thanks," Deacon said, genuinely appreciative of the steaming plate. The meatloaf wasn't going to win any cooking competitions, but after a day of driving and vending machine snacks, it looked like a feast. He was halfway through his meal when he noticed the group at the counter had grown quieter, their conversation becoming more focused. More glances were thrown his way. The bearded leader whispered something to his companions and they all chuckled, eyes darting toward Deacon's booth. Keeping his movements casual, Deacon assessed his surroundings. 2 exits, the main door and likely one through the kitchen. 4 potential threats, possibly more outside. 3 other truckers in the restaurant who would likely stay out of any trouble. The waitress and 2 other staff members. A family with 2 small children that he'd want to keep away from any conflict. The military training kicked in automatically, sizing up the situation, identifying risks, planning contingencies. He hated that his mind still worked this way, but tonight, it might prove useful. Deacon focused on cutting another piece of meatloaf, deliberately slowing his movements. He wasn't going to be rushed out of his dinner by intimidation tactics. He'd faced worse, much worse, in dusty villages and mountain passes halfway around the world. The bearded man finally pushed away from the counter and sauntered over to Deacon's booth, his 3 friends following a few steps behind. He stopped at the edge of the table, thumbs hooked in his belt loops, looking down at Deacon with what was probably meant to be an intimidating stare. "Evening," Deacon said calmly, not looking up from his plate. "That's our table you're sitting at," the man said, his voice carrying through the now quieter restaurant. Other diners were beginning to notice the confrontation brewing. Deacon took his time chewing before responding. "Didn't see any names on it." "We sit there every Wednesday when we come through," the bearded man continued, leaning forward slightly. "Everybody around here knows that." "First time through," Deacon replied, finally looking up to meet the man's gaze. "No way I could have known that." One of the other bikers, a shorter man with a shaved head and a nasty scar across his cheek, stepped forward. "Doesn't matter if you knew or not. That's our spot. Find somewhere else." Deacon glanced around the half-empty restaurant, then back at the men. "Plenty of open tables. I'm already settled here with my food. I'll be done in 15 minutes. The bearded leader exchanged looks with his friends, clearly not expecting such a calm response. Most people would have already moved by now, intimidated by their presence alone. "Maybe you didn't hear me clearly," the man said, placing both palms flat on the edge of Deacon's table. "This ain't a request. This is our table." From the corner of his eye, Deacon saw Barb behind the counter, phone in hand, presumably ready to call for help if things escalated. The family with children was hurriedly paying their bill. Deacon set down his fork and knife, arranging them neatly on his plate. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his coffee before responding. "Look, I'm just passing through. I've had a long day on the road and I'm tired. I don't want any trouble." "Should have thought about that before you sat at our table," the scarred man said. The bearded leader straightened up, crossing his arms across his chest. "I'll make it simple for you. You've got 10 seconds to find another seat, or we'll help you find one." The restaurant had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching the confrontation now, tension thick in the air. Deacon felt a familiar sensation washing over him, a calm focus that came from years of dealing with high-pressure situations. His heart rate remained steady, his breathing controlled. This moment, right here, was the crossroads. What happened next would determine whether this was just an unpleasant encounter or something that would end badly for everyone involved. Deacon had seen enough violence in his lifetime. He had no desire to see more, but he also wasn't a man who responded well to threats. The bearded leader started counting down loudly. 10, 9, 8. Deacon looked up at the man, his dark eyes steady and unblinking. Something in his gaze made the leader falter for just a moment. The counting briefly interrupted before he continued. 7, 6. The restaurant manager, a thin man in his 50s, approached cautiously. "Everything okay over here, gentlemen?" "Stay out of this," one of the bikers warned. 5, 4. The leader continued. Deacon took a deep breath. The night was about to get a whole lot more complicated. 3, 2. The bearded leader continued his countdown, voice growing louder with each number. Deacon raised his hand slightly. "Hold on." The counting stopped. "A small victory." "I'm just trying to enjoy a quiet meal after 14 hours on the road," Deacon said, his voice calm but firm. "I don't know about your table rules, and frankly, I don't care much about them either. But I do care about finishing my dinner in peace." The scarred biker stepped forward. "You deaf or just stupid? Boss told you to move." Deacon's eyes never left the bearded leader. "I heard him. But here's the thing, I've had a really long day. Started driving at 5 this morning. Got stuck in traffic outside Nashville for 2 hours. Had a shipment delay in Knoxville. And I've still got another day of driving ahead of me. Not my problem, the leader said, but Deacon noticed a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Never said it was. I'm just explaining why I'm not in the mood to be pushed around over a booth in a half-empty truck stop. Deacon gestured to his plate. All I want is to finish my meal, take a shower, and get some sleep. That's it. The restaurant manager hovered nearby, clearly unsure whether to intervene further. Barb, the waitress, stood behind the counter, phone still in hand, ready to call for help. The leader leaned down, bringing his face close to Deacon's. You've got a real attitude problem, know that? Most folks around here show us some respect. Respect is earned, Deacon replied quietly, not demanded from strangers trying to eat dinner. A dangerous silence followed. The other truckers in the restaurant had stopped eating, watching the confrontation unfold. The family with children had hurried out the door. Even the kitchen staff had paused their work, peering through the service window. You got any idea who you're talking to? The leader growled. Deacon took another sip of his coffee, deliberately unhurried. No, and I don't particularly care. The leader straightened up, a red flush creeping up his neck. Boys, I think our friend here needs a lesson in manners. One of the other bikers, a tall, lanky man with a handlebar mustache, cracked his knuckles. Been a while since we had some fun. Deacon set his coffee cup down carefully. I'm going to say this one more time. I don't want trouble. I just want to finish my meal. Too late for that, the scarred biker said with a grin that showed a missing front tooth. The bearded leader reached across the table and grabbed Deacon's plate, sliding it away from him. Meal's over. Something shifted in Deacon's eyes. A subtle change that would have been easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. The calm facade remained, but behind it something cold and calculating had awakened. Don't do that, Deacon said, his voice quieter now. The leader smirked at his companions, emboldened by what he mistook for fear. Or what, Deacon sighed deeply. Look, I'm trying to be reasonable here. I spent 12 years in the Marines. Force recon, 3 tours overseas. I've seen enough fighting to last a lifetime. I'm not looking to add more tonight. This revelation caused a brief pause. The fourth biker, who had remained silent until now, studied Deacon with newfound interest. Military, huh? That's supposed to scare us? Not trying to scare anyone. Just explaining why I'd rather avoid violence when there's no good reason for it. Deacon glanced at his watch. I've got 15 more minutes before I need to shower and get some sleep. How about we all just go about our business? The leader laughed, but it sounded forced. Nice try, old man. But you're sitting in our spot and you're not showing proper respect. That's 2 strikes already. Deacon nodded slowly as if considering this. And what's the 3rd strike? Thinking you can talk your way out of this, the leader said, suddenly reaching across the table and grabbing Deacon's collar. It happened so fast that most onlookers would have missed the details. One moment, the bearded man had his fist wrapped in Deacon's shirt. The next, he was wincing in pain as his wrist was caught in a grip that looked deceptively gentle but clearly wasn't. Let go, Deacon said simply. The leader's face contorted with rage and surprise. He tried to pull back, but Deacon's hold remained firm. Not enough to cause real damage, but enough to send a clear message. You're making a big mistake, the leader hissed through clenched teeth. No, Deacon replied. You are. With deliberate slowness, Deacon released the man's wrist and sat back in his booth. Last chance to walk away. We can all pretend this never happened. The scarred biker reached into his jacket. But before he could pull out whatever he was reaching for, the restaurant manager's voice cut through the tension. That's enough. I've already called the sheriff. Deputies are on their way. The leader rubbed his wrist, glaring at Deacon with undisguised hatred. This ain't over. It could be, Deacon said. Your choice. The fourth biker, who had been watching Deacon closely, tugged at the leader's sleeve. Come on, Ricky. Not worth getting the cops involved. Ricky hesitated, clearly torn between saving face and avoiding trouble with law enforcement. After a tense moment, he spat on the floor near Deacon's booth. We'll be outside waiting when you're done. Let's see how tough you are without all these witnesses. The 4 men backed away slowly, maintaining eye contact with Deacon until they reached the door. With a final threatening glare, they pushed through the exit and disappeared into the parking lot. A collective sigh of relief swept through the restaurant. Conversations gradually resumed, though much quieter than before. The manager approached Deacon's table. I'm sorry about that, he said, running a hand through his thinning hair. Those guys come through every few weeks, always causing trouble. Not your fault, Deacon replied, retrieving his plate from where the leader had pushed it. Sheriff's deputies should be here in about 15 minutes. You'll need to give a statement. Deacon nodded. I'll be here. Barb came over with a fresh cup of coffee. On the house, she said with a sympathetic smile. Food's probably cold now. Want me to heat it up? No need. I've eaten worse. Deacon offered her a tired smile. Thank you, though. As Barb walked away, Deacon surveyed the restaurant. The immediate danger had passed, but a new problem had emerged. Those bikers would be waiting for him outside, and he couldn't stay in this truck stop forever. He still had a schedule to keep. Deacon ate methodically, mind working through different scenarios. The smart move would be to wait for the deputies to arrive, give his statement, and ask for an escort to his truck. But that would mean delays, paperwork, and possibly getting pulled into whatever local grudges existed between the sheriff's department and the motorcycle club. The alternative was to handle it himself, something he had plenty of experience with from his military days. But that path carried its own risks, especially in civilian life where the rules of engagement were very different. A young trucker from a nearby table slid into the booth across from Deacon. That was something else, he said in a low voice. Those road demons don't back down for nobody. Road demons? Deacon asked. That's what they call themselves. Local motorcycle club. They think they own this stretch of highway. The young man extended his hand. I'm Ray, by the way. Deacon, he replied, shaking the offered hand. Listen, Deacon, those guys weren't just talking. They'll be waiting for you. Ray leaned forward, lowering his voice further. There's a back exit through the kitchen. Leads to the employee parking lot. Might be your best bet. Deacon considered this. Appreciate the tip, but I'm not big on running. Not about running. It's about picking your battles. Those guys play dirty. Weapons, numbers, whatever it takes. No shame in a strategic exit. The advice made sense. Deacon had learned in the military that bravery without strategy was just another word for foolishness. Still, something in him resisted the idea of sneaking out the back. How many in their group total? Deacon asked. Usually 8 or 9 when they roll through. Big Ricky, the one you just faced down, he's their leader. Ray shook his head. You really got under his skin. No one stands up to him around here. First time for everything, Deacon said, finishing the last of his coffee. Ray stood up. Well, good luck, man. Whatever you decide, he hesitated. For what it's worth, that was pretty impressive how you handled his grab. Military training? Deacon nodded. Marine Force Recon. A look of understanding crossed Ray's face. Thought so. My brother was a Marine. Different kind of training altogether. He tapped the table twice. Deputies should be here soon. Maybe that'll cool things down. As Ray walked away, Deacon stared at his empty plate. The clock on the wall showed 8:35 p.m. He had wanted to be showered and in bed by 9, ready for an early start tomorrow. Now he had to deal with angry bikers, police statements, and a potentially sleepless night. Outside the large windows of the restaurant, he could see the parking lot lights illuminating the row of motorcycles. Their owners were nowhere in sight, likely hiding in the shadows, waiting for him to emerge. Deacon reached for his wallet, counting out bills to pay for his meal. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. This night was far from over. Deacon handed Barb the cash for his meal, plus a generous tip. Thanks for the coffee. You sure you don't want to wait for the deputies? She asked, concern evident in her eyes. I've dealt with worse than a few angry bikers, Deacon replied with a slight smile. But I appreciate the thought. The restaurant manager approached again, phone in hand. Deputies are about 10 minutes out. Said to tell you to stay put. Deacon nodded but made no promises. He had spent enough time around law enforcement, both military and civilian, to know that their arrival would complicate matters. Statements would need to be taken, reports filed, hours of his time would be wasted, and he had a strict delivery schedule to keep. Mind if I use your restroom before they get here? Deacon asked. The manager pointed toward the back. Through there, past the gift shop. Deacon walked unhurriedly toward the restrooms, aware of the eyes following him. The gift shop was small but packed with trucker essentials, snacks, and touristy items. "Hey, bro," said casually, picking up a state map and flipping through it. The young cashier watched him nervously. Those guys still outside? Deacon asked, keeping his voice conversational. The cashier, a college-aged kid with tired eyes, nodded. They're by the side of the building smoking. All of them, not just the 4 from inside. How many total? 8 tonight. The kid hesitated. They come through about twice a month. Always trouble. Deacon set the map down. Any other exits besides the main doors in the kitchen? Loading dock and back, but it's alarmed after hours, the cashier said. And there's a fire exit by the showers, but that'll set off alarms too. Deacon nodded his thanks and continued to the restroom. Inside, he splashed cold water on his face and studied his reflection in the mirror. The face that stared back was weathered but strong. Deep lines around the eyes from years of squinting in desert sun. A small scar above his right eyebrow from a training accident years ago. He was tired. Bone tired, the kind of fatigue that came from hours on the road and years of carrying invisible weights. He had left the violence of his military life behind when he got his commercial driver's license 3 years ago. The open road had been his therapy, the endless miles a kind of meditation, and now this. A pointless confrontation with men who had nothing better to do than harass strangers over something as trivial as a booth in a truck stop diner. Deacon dried his hands and made a decision. He wasn't going to wait for the deputies. He wasn't going to sneak out the back. He was going to walk out the front door like any other customer, get to his truck and continue his journey. If trouble found him along the way, he would deal with it. He returned to the restaurant area where Barb intercepted him. "Your duffel," she said, handing him the small bag he had brought in. "Thought you might need it." "Thank you," Deacon replied, genuinely touched by the small kindness. The manager was watching the parking lot through the windows. "They're still out there. All of them. Might be smarter to wait for the deputies." "Might be," Deacon agreed. "But I've got a schedule to keep." Ray, the young trucker who had spoken to him earlier, approached. "Listen, man, I'm headed out too. My rig's parked a few spots away from yours. We could walk out together. Safety in numbers and all that." Deacon considered the offer. On one hand, he didn't want to involve anyone else in his problems. On the other, the young man was leaving anyway and might become a target simply by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Appreciate that," Deacon said with a nod. "Let's go." As they headed toward the exit, the manager called after them. "I'll tell the deputies to look for you in the parking lot." The glass doors slid open and the cool night air hit Deacon's face. The parking lot was well lit near the building, but darkness gathered at its edges. The row of motorcycles gleamed under the lights, their owners nowhere to be seen, but Deacon could feel their presence, the weight of watching eyes from the shadows. "My truck's the blue Peterbilt over there," Ray said, pointing to the far row. "Yours is the red one, right?" "That's right," Deacon confirmed, scanning the area methodically. Nothing moved in the immediate vicinity, but he caught a flash of movement near the side of the building. "Stay alert." They walked at a steady pace across the asphalt, boots crunching on loose gravel. The silence was too complete. No voices, no traffic noise, not even the usual sounds of a busy truck stop. It was the kind of quiet that Deacon recognized from ambushes. "Something's not right," Ray muttered. "Too quiet." Deacon nodded slightly. "Keep walking. Act normal." They were halfway to their trucks when the first figure stepped out from between 2 parked semis, the scarred biker from the restaurant. A moment later, another appeared from behind a dumpster. Then 2 more from the shadows near the edge of the lot. "Told you we'd be waiting," came a voice from behind them. Deacon turned to see Ricky, the bearded leader, flanked by 3 more men. The road demons had positioned themselves in a loose circle, cutting off easy escape routes. "We're just trying to get to our trucks," Ray said, his voice steady despite the situation. "No need for trouble." "Should have thought about that before your friend here disrespected us," Ricky said, eyes fixed on Deacon. "Now he's going to learn what happens when you mess with the road demons." Deacon set his duffel bag down slowly. "Last chance to walk away," he said quietly. "Deputies are on their way," one of the bikers laughed. "Cops around here take their sweet time. We'll be long gone before they show up." Ricky cracked his knuckles. "Besides, won't be much left for them to find." Deacon took a deep breath, centering himself. He had hoped to avoid this, but some confrontations couldn't be sidestepped. "Ray, when this starts, get to your truck and lock the doors." Ray shook his head. "I'm not leaving you to face 8 guys alone." "I appreciate the sentiment," Deacon replied, not taking his eyes off the approaching bikers. "But this isn't your fight." Ricky pulled something from his back pocket, the metallic glint of brass knuckles sliding over his fingers. "Enough talking." In that moment, time seemed to slow for Deacon. His senses sharpened the way they always did before combat. He noted each man's position, the weapons visible in their hands, brass knuckles, a chain, what looked like a switchblade. He cataloged potential improvised weapons within reach, a discarded bottle, a loose piece of lumber near the dumpster. Most importantly, he calculated distances and timing. The first move came from the scarred biker, lunging forward with a wild swing. Deacon sidestepped with a fluidity that belied his size, letting the punch sail past. In the same motion, he gripped the man's extended arm and used the biker's own momentum to propel him face first into a parked car. The impact was loud in the quiet lot, the thud of flesh against metal, followed by the clatter of the man dropping to the asphalt. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. "Get him," Ricky shouted, breaking the spell. Two bikers rushed Deacon simultaneously. He stepped into their attack rather than away from it, a counterintuitive move that caught them off guard. His elbow connected with one man's solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs in an explosive gasp. As that man doubled over, Deacon pivoted, blocking the second attacker's wild swing and delivering a precise strike to the side of the knee. There was a sickening pop, followed by a howl of pain as the biker collapsed. Ray had backed up against a truck but found himself cornered by one of the bikers wielding a chain. The young trucker ducked under the first swing and tackled his attacker around the waist, both men tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs. Ricky and the remaining bikers hesitated, clearly shocked by how quickly the odds had shifted. What should have been an easy beatdown had turned into something else entirely. "What the hell are you?" one of them muttered. Deacon stood calmly in a loose, ready stance. "I told you. Force recon. Now take your friends and leave before this gets worse." Ricky's face contorted with rage. "I don't care if you were Navy SEAL, Green Beret, or Batman. Nobody makes me look bad on my turf." He lunged forward, brass knuckles raised. Deacon's response was measured, efficient. No wasted movement, no unnecessary force. He deflected the blow and countered with a short, sharp strike to Ricky's floating rib. As the bigger man winced and tried to recover, Deacon swept his legs from under him, sending him crashing to the ground. Before Ricky could rise, Deacon had him pinned, one knee planted firmly between his shoulder blades. The bearded man's arm locked in a hold that hovered just at the threshold of breaking. "Stay down," Deacon said, his voice still maddeningly calm. The remaining bikers looked at each other uncertainly. Their leader was subdued, 3 of their brothers were down, and the target of their planned beating didn't even look winded. Ray had managed to get the upper hand in his struggle, pinning his opponent with surprising effectiveness. "What now?" he called to Deacon. Before Deacon could answer, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the night. Red and blue lights flashed at the entrance to the truck stop. "Now we let the law handle it," Deacon replied, maintaining his hold on Ricky, who had begun to struggle again. "Easy there. A broken arm won't impress your friends." The biker stilled, though his breathing was heavy with rage and pain. "This isn't over," he growled. "Yes, it is," Deacon said firmly. "Because next time I won't be so restrained." 2 patrol cars pulled into the lot, spotlights sweeping across the scene. Deputies emerged with hands on their holsters, taking in the scattered bikers, some groaning on the ground, others frozen in place. "Hands where I can see them." "Everybody," one deputy shouted. Slowly, carefully, Deacon released his hold on Ricky and stood up, hands raised at shoulder height. Ray did the same, backing away from the biker he had been restraining. As the deputies approached, Deacon caught Ray's eye and gave him a small nod of approval. The young trucker had handled himself well, the night air filled with the crackle of radios, the terse commands of law enforcement, and the complaints of the subdued bikers. Deacon knew his schedule was definitely shot now. There would be statements to give, perhaps paperwork to sign, but as he watched the deputies handcuff Ricky and the others, he felt a curious sense of peace. Sometimes confrontation was unavoidable. The trick was knowing when to engage and when to walk away, and how to end things cleanly when engagement became necessary. One of the deputies approached him, eyebrows raised at the scene. "Mind telling me what happened here?" "Self-defense," Deacon said simply to the deputy who approached him. "They surrounded us when we were trying to get to our trucks." The deputy, a stocky man with salt and pepper hair and deep creases around his eyes, looked from Deacon to the bikers being handcuffed, then back again. His nameplate read Wilson, That's what the folks inside said might happen, Deputy Wilson acknowledged. Said you tried to avoid trouble. Ray stepped forward. It's true. These guys had us surrounded. 8 against 2. They had weapons. He pointed to the brass knuckles now lying on the asphalt where Ricky had dropped them. Wilson nodded and pulled out a small notebook. I'm going to need statements from both of you. Deacon glanced at his watch. Already past 9. His schedule was definitely shot now. How long will this take? Faster if you cooperate, Wilson replied with a hint of a smile. We've been trying to build a case against these guys for months. They've been terrorizing folks up and down this stretch of highway. From the patrol car where he was being held, Ricky shouted, "This is bogus. We were just talking when this guy went crazy. Ask anybody." Wilson ignored him, focusing on Deacon. Military background? Deacon raised an eyebrow in surprise. The way you handled yourself, Wilson explained. That wasn't street fighting. That was trained combat. Marines, Deacon confirmed. Force recon. Got out 3 years ago. The deputy nodded with understanding. My brother was a Marine. Regular infantry, though. Not you special forces types. He glanced over at the subdued bikers. Bet they regret picking that fight. A younger deputy approached them, evidence bags in hand. Got the brass knuckles, chain, and 2 knives from their pockets. Sarge? Good. Add weapons charges to the list. Wilson turned back to Deacon and Ray. Look, I need you both to come down to the station to give official statements. It shouldn't take more than an hour, and it would really help us put these guys away for a while. Deacon exchanged glances with Ray. Neither of them wanted the delay, but both understood the importance of following through. Our trucks, Deacon began. They'll be fine here, Wilson assured him. I'll have one of my deputies keep an eye on them. You can ride with me, and we'll bring you back when the paperwork's done. 30 minutes later, Deacon found himself sitting in a small interview room at the county sheriff's office. The walls were an institutional beige, the furniture utilitarian. A cup of surprisingly decent coffee sat on the table in front of him. The door opened, and Wilson entered with a folder and a digital recorder. Sorry for the wait. Just need to get your official statement, then you can get back to your truck. Deacon recounted the events of the evening. The initial confrontation in the restaurant, the threats, and finally the attack in the parking lot. Wilson took notes and occasionally asked for clarification. So you subdued Ricky Peterson without causing serious injury? Wilson asked, sounding impressed. Wasn't trying to hurt anyone, Deacon explained. Just wanted them to back off. Wilson shook his head with a small smile. Most people wouldn't show that kind of restraint, especially not against 8 attackers with weapons. Had enough of hurting people in the military, Deacon said quietly. Wilson studied him for a moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. Listen, Peterson and his crew have been a problem around here for years. Intimidation, assault, vandalism, you name it. But witnesses never want to testify, and the victims are usually just passing through, like yourself. You're hoping I'll stick around to testify. Deacon guessed. Would make the case a lot stronger, Wilson confirmed. But I understand if you can't. Trucking schedules and all that. Deacon thought about his delivery timeline. He was supposed to be in Chicago by tomorrow afternoon. A court appearance would mean days of delay, maybe weeks, depending on the docket. I've got commitments, he said finally. Delivery schedule, family waiting for me up north. I figured as much, Wilson said without judgment. We'll work with what we've got. The weapons charges alone should keep them occupied for a bit, and we've got plenty of surveillance footage from the truck stop. There was a knock at the door, and the younger deputy poked his head in. Sarge, got a minute? Wilson stepped outside, leaving Deacon alone with his thoughts. The clock on the wall showed 10:45 p.m. Even if he got back to his truck within the hour, he'd be operating on much less sleep than he'd planned. The door opened again, and Wilson returned with a serious expression. We may have a situation. Deacon's instincts immediately went on alert. What kind of situation? Peterson made his one phone call. To his brother. Wilson sat down heavily. His brother Dale is the president of the Road Demons. The entire club, not just this local chapter. Word is he's on his way here with reinforcements. How many? Could be 15, maybe 20 riders. Wilson ran a hand over his face. We're a small department. Got 4 deputies on duty tonight, including myself. Deacon understood the unspoken concern. And you're worried they might try something? Wilson nodded. Dale Peterson has a reputation. 3 tours in Iraq with the army. Came back different, according to those who knew him before. Got a temper and a long memory for grudges. You're telling me this because you and your friend Ray might be targets. These guys don't let things go, especially not public humiliation. Wilson leaned forward. We can offer protection while you're in our jurisdiction, but once you hit the road. Deacon absorbed this information silently. It wasn't the first time someone had held a grudge against him, and it likely wouldn't be the last. But civilian life was supposed to be different from war zones. When are they expected to arrive? He asked. Couple hours, maybe less if they're pushing it. Dale was reportedly in Nashville when he got the call. Deacon stood up. I need to get back to my truck. Wilson didn't try to stop him. I'll have a deputy drive you, and I'll call ahead to make sure the truck stop knows what's happening. During the ride back, Deacon stared out the window at the dark countryside. The deputy behind the wheel, a young woman with short blonde hair and a no-nonsense attitude, kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror. Is it true you took down 4 of them by yourself? She finally asked. Something like that, Deacon replied, not interested in reliving the details. Impressive, she said. Most folks around here are scared to death of the road demons. Fear gives people power they haven't earned, Deacon said. They pulled into the truck stop, which was noticeably quieter now. A patrol car was parked near the entrance, and another deputy stood talking with the manager. The row of motorcycles was gone, impounded. Presumably, Ray was waiting beside his blue Peterbilt, relief washing over his face when he spotted Deacon. Man, I was getting worried, he said as Deacon approached. They told me about the brother and his crew heading this way. Yeah, sounds like we stirred up a hornet's nest. Deacon glanced around the parking lot, habitually checking for threats. You should get on the road. Put some distance between yourself and this place. Ray shook his head. I was thinking the same about you. These guys got a good look at both of us. We should both clear out. The female deputy who had driven Deacon back joined them. Sergeant Wilson asked me to stay with you until you're ready to leave. We'll escort you to the county line if you want. Deacon considered the offer. An escort would be helpful, but only for a short distance. The road demons would still be out there, possibly looking for revenge. I appreciate that, he said, but first I need a shower and some sleep. Can't safely drive without it, Ray looked alarmed. You're staying? After everything that's happened? Don't have much choice. Been driving too long already. Any longer would be dangerous. Deacon turned to the deputy. How long until the reinforcements arrive? 2 hours minimum, according to our sources. Probably longer, Deacon nodded. That's enough time for a quick shower and a couple hours of sleep. I can be on the road before they get here. The deputy didn't look convinced. It's your call, but I'd feel better if you just left now. Trust me, an exhausted trucker is more dangerous than any biker gang, Deacon said with a tired smile. I just need 90 minutes. Then I'll be gone. Ray clapped him on the shoulder. Well, I've got to get moving. Got a delivery in Louisville by morning. He hesitated. You sure you'll be okay? I'll be fine, Deacon assured him. You get going. After Ray reluctantly departed, Deacon grabbed his duffel from his truck and headed for the shower facilities. The deputy followed at a discreet distance, standing guard outside. The hot water was exactly what Deacon needed. He stood under the spray, letting it wash away the tension of the evening. His body ached from the brief fight. Not from injuries, but from the sudden explosion of action after hours of sitting behind the wheel. As he dressed in fresh clothes, Deacon considered his options. The smart play was to get as far from here as possible, as quickly as possible. The road demons didn't sound like the type to let things go, and he had no interest in an ongoing feud. But running wasn't in his nature. Never had been. And driving while exhausted wasn't just dangerous, it was potentially deadly, to himself and others on the road. He stepped out of the shower area to find the female deputy still waiting. All set? She asked. Going to catch some sleep in my cab, Deacon replied. Just for an hour or so, she nodded. I'll be patrolling the lot. Radio in my car will alert me if there's any sign of the road demons. Deacon thanked her and walked to his truck. The parking lot was quiet now, most of the other trucks dark as their drivers slept. He climbed into his cab, locked the doors, and settled into the small but comfortable sleeping berth behind the seats. Despite his exhaustion, sleep didn't come immediately. His mind was still processing the evening's events, calculating risks, planning contingencies, the same mental routines he had developed in combat zones. Old habits that were hard to break. Eventually, his eyes grew heavy. As he drifted toward sleep, Deacon wondered how a simple meal stop had turned into this complicated situation. All he had wanted was dinner and rest. Now he had a motorcycle gang potentially gunning for him. Life had been simpler in the Marines in some ways. At least there the enemies were clearly defined. His last thought before sleep claimed him was that he should call his sister in Chicago, let her know he might be delayed. Mom's birthday would have to wait. A sharp knock on the truck door jolted Deacon from sleep. His eyes snapped open, instantly alert, hand automatically reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Old habits. "Hey, wake up," came an urgent voice from outside. Deacon checked his watch. He'd been asleep for just over an hour. Not enough, but it would have to do. He slid to the door and cracked it open to find the female deputy looking up at him, her expression tense. "What's wrong?" he asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. "They're coming," she said. "Highway patrol spotted a group of motorcycles heading this way from Nashville. At least 15 riders." Deacon nodded, fully awake now. "How far out?" 20 minutes, maybe less." She glanced around the dark parking lot. "Sergeant Wilson is on his way with backup, but they're scattered across the county. It'll be just me and Carter until they arrive." Carter must be the other deputy Deacon had seen earlier, 2 officers against 15 angry bikers. Not good odds. "I should get moving," Deacon said, reaching for his jacket. The deputy, her nameplate read Lopez, nodded. "That would be smart. We can give you an escort to the interstate." Deacon climbed down from the cab and did a quick walk-around inspection of his truck, a habit ingrained from years on the road. Everything looked in order. As he completed the circle, he noticed movement by the restaurant entrance. The manager was locking up, his movements hurried. "They're closing early?" Deacon asked. Lopez nodded grimly. "Wilson's orders. Getting civilians out of the way in case there's trouble." The implications of that statement hung in the air between them. The authorities were expecting violence, enough to warrant closing a 24-hour truck stop. "You and Carter should leave too," Deacon said quietly. "Not your job to get caught in the middle of someone else's vendetta." Lopez straightened, her hand resting instinctively on her holstered weapon. "It's exactly our job. Protecting people is what we signed up for." Deacon recognized the determination in her eyes, the same look he'd seen in young Marines facing their first real combat situation. Brave, committed, but perhaps not fully aware of what they might be facing. "These guys are dangerous," he warned. "Military-trained leadership from what Wilson said. They won't play by the rules." "Neither do we when pushed," she replied with a hint of steel in her voice. "Carter was Force Recon too, just like you. Did 2 tours in Afghanistan before joining the department. That changed things." Deacon reassessed the situation. 2 trained deputies, one with combat experience, might stand a chance at holding the line until reinforcements arrived. "Might. How good is your cover here?" he asked, scanning the parking lot with new eyes, assessing defensive positions. "Not great," Lopez admitted. "Lot of open space. Building offers some protection, but too many approaches to cover with just 2 of us." Deacon made a decision. "I'm staying." Lopez looked surprised. "You don't have to do that. This isn't your fight anymore. Became my fight when they surrounded me and Ray." Deacon turned to face her fully. "And I don't leave people in bad situations when I can help." A small smile crossed Lopez's face. "Carter said you might say that. Something about Marines never changing." The radio on Lopez's belt crackled. "Lopez, this is Carter. Highway patrol update. Riders just passed the county line. ETA 15 minutes. Wilson and backup are still 20 out." Lopez keyed her radio. "Copy that. I've got our witness with me. He's offering assistance." There was a brief pause before Carter responded. "Roger that. Meet me by the west entrance, bringing some equipment." Deacon followed Lopez to the west side of the truck stop where Carter was unloading gear from his patrol car. The deputy was younger than Deacon had initially thought, probably early 30s, but moved with the controlled efficiency that marked him as military. "Deacon," he said with a nod. "Heard you handled yourself pretty well earlier." "Did what was necessary," Deacon replied. Carter laid out several items on the hood of his patrol car, extra flashlights, a first aid kit, and what looked like road flares. "Not exactly tactical gear, but it's what we've got." "What's the plan?" Deacon asked. "Officially, maintain order and prevent any escalation until backup arrives." Carter met Deacon's eyes. "Unofficially, keep these guys from burning this place down or hurting anyone while we're outnumbered." Lopez checked her weapon discreetly. Most of the civilians are gone. Couple of truckers refuse to leave their rigs, but they're staying locked inside. Good, Carter said. Fewer people to protect. Deacon assessed their position. The truck stop was situated just off the highway, with a large open parking lot surrounding the main building. Too many approaches to cover, just as Lopez had said. We need to control their entry point, Deacon suggested. Funnel them where we want them. Carter nodded in agreement. Access road. It's the only way in with motorcycles. The three of them moved quickly, positioning the patrol cars to narrow the entrance to the truck stop. Not a blockade, that might provoke an immediate confrontation, but an arrangement that would slow the riders and make them approach in a more controlled fashion. Deacon helped place the road flares strategically, creating additional visual barriers that would channel the approaching bikers. You've done this before, Lopez observed. Something similar, Deacon acknowledged. Different context, same principles. As they worked, Carter's radio crackled again. All units be advised, motorcycle group now 5 minutes out from Flying J truck stop. Proceed with caution. Multiple riders reported armed. The three of them exchanged glances. Time was running out. Lopez, take position by the restaurant entrance. Clear line of sight to the access road. Good cover from the concrete barriers. Carter pointed to a spot near the gas pumps. I'll take center position here, Deacon. I'll be mobile, Deacon said. Better if they don't see me right away. Carter didn't argue. Just don't put yourself at unnecessary risk. We're trying to prevent violence, not invite it. Deacon moved to a shadowed area between two parked semis that offered a good vantage point of the entire front area. From here, he could observe without being immediately spotted, and move quickly to either deputy's position if needed. The night had grown quiet. The usual background hum of a truck stop, idling engines, distant conversations, the occasional slam of a truck door, had all faded away. Now there was just the soft buzz of the parking lot lights and the distant whoosh of occasional traffic on the highway. Then they heard it, the distinctive rumble of multiple motorcycles approaching in formation. The sound grew louder, echoing in the night air, until headlights appeared at the turnoff from the highway. The lead rider slowed as he approached the narrowed entrance, raising a hand to signal the others. Even from a distance, Deacon could see this man was different from Ricky and his crew. He sat straighter on his bike, his movements controlled and deliberate. Military bearing, without question. Dale Peterson, Deacon guessed. The brother, the one with army experience and a bad temper. The riders came through the makeshift channel created by the patrol cars, headlights cutting through the darkness. 15 bikes, just as reported. They formed a loose semicircle in the parking lot. Engines still running. Facing the brightly lit building, Carter stepped forward, one hand resting casually near his holster, the other holding a flashlight. Evening, gentlemen. Can I help you with something? The lead rider, Dale, shut off his engine and dismounted. He was tall and lean, with a close-cropped gray beard and the weathered face of someone who'd spent years in the sun. His leather vest displayed more patches than the others, marking him as the club president. Where's my brother? He asked, his voice carrying easily across the parking lot. If you're referring to Richard Peterson, he's been taken to county lockup, Carter replied calmly. Charges include assault, possession of illegal weapons, and making criminal threats. Dale took a step forward. And the man who put him there? Your brother and his friends attacked 2 innocent people, Lopez called from her position. They got what was coming to them. Dale's gaze shifted to her, then back to Carter. Not how I heard it. I heard some hotshot trucker disrespected my brother, then jumped him and his boys in the parking lot. That's not what the security cameras show, Carter said. Not what the witnesses reported either. From his position in the shadows, Deacon watched the exchange carefully. Dale was keeping his temper in check so far, but the tension in his body language was evident. The other riders remained on their bikes, engines idling, ready to move on command. We're not, Lee,